I need you to understand something. I didn't go to David's office that Tuesday looking for anything. I went because he'd forgotten his heart medication. Again. The little amber bottle was sitting on the kitchen counter next to his travel mug, the pills rattling softly when I picked it up. That sound, that tiny, ordinary rattle, feels like a curse now. Like the first note of a song you can't unhear. The receptionist at Hargrave and Associates smiled when I walked in. "Margaret, he's in a meeting." "I'll just leave it on his desk," I said. "Won't be a minute." She hesitated, just a half second. That's the thing I keep replaying. That tiny gap in her politeness where something else flickered through. But she waved me toward the back hall, and I walked the familiar path I'd walked 100 times before. Past the framed diplomas, past the watercolor of the Millbrook courthouse that David's first wife had painted. Past the smell of old paper and leather that always meant safety to me. His door was closed. I turned the knob anyway. The meeting was just him, alone, standing at his desk with a file open, his back to me. He didn't hear me at first. And there, spread out like evidence at a crime scene, were the photographs. Not the kind you're thinking. A girl, no, a young woman, early 20s maybe. Dark hair like mine used to be before the silver took over. She was standing on what looked like a college quad, laughing at something off camera. And next to that, a birth certificate. Elaine Davies. Born October 14, 2001. Father, David Michael Hargrave. My husband's name. The paper shook in my hands before I realized I was holding it. That's when David turned. His face did something I'd never seen before. It didn't crumple. It didn't show guilt. It went completely blank, like someone had erased him from the inside out. "Margaret," he said, very quiet, "you shouldn't be here." That's all, not I can explain. Not it's not what you think asterisk. Just, you shouldn't be here. As if I was the problem, as if my presence was the mistake. I dropped the pill bottle on his desk. The sound was loud, plastic on wood. It rolled toward him and stopped at the edge, teetering, like everything was about to. I walked out, past the receptionist who wouldn't look at me, past the watercolor that suddenly seemed like a lie, out into the parking lot where my car sat in the August heat, the steering wheel burning my palms when I grabbed it. I sat there for I don't know how long. The air conditioner blasted, but I was still sweating. Or maybe that was something else. Maybe that was my body trying to purge 25 years of marriage through my pores. The photograph was in my purse. I hadn't meant to take it. My hand had just closed around it. A reflex. Evidence. That word kept repeating in my head. Evidence asterisk. I drove home on autopilot. Millbrook's main street scrolled past. The Presbyterian church where we'd been married. The diner where David ordered the same thing every Saturday. The retirement community where my mother lived, where I'd been planning to volunteer next month when her arthritis got worse. All these landmarks of a life that suddenly felt like a stage set. Flat, painted canvas. At home, I stood in the kitchen where I'd been making coffee that morning. The mug was still in the sink. His mug. The one our son Thomas gave him for Father's Day when he was 12. World's best dad asterisk. I turned it over in my hands. The crack in the handle had gotten bigger. I'd been meaning to superglue it. That seemed important now. That crack. My phone buzzed. "David," I let it go to voicemail. Then a text, "We need to talk. Come home first, please." I didn't answer. Instead, I spread the birth certificate on the counter. Elaine Davies. Mother, Sarah Davies, I knew that name. Sarah Davies had been a client, a widow. David had handled her husband's estate 12 years ago. I remembered because she'd called the house once, crying about some paperwork. I'd made tea. David had taken the phone into his study and closed the door. I thought she was just another grieving spouse, the kind that clings to the attorney because they don't know who else to call. I pulled my laptop toward me. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I typed her name into the search bar. Sarah Davies Millbrook. There. An obituary, 3 years ago, breast cancer. She was survived by her daughter, Elaine, a student at Purdue. 3 years. While David and I were planning our anniversary trip to Nashville, while we were refinancing the house, while he was telling me about the new paralegal they'd hired, while he was making love to me in our bedroom with the curtains open because the neighbors were away. The phone rang again. This time it was my sister Susan. I almost didn't answer, but habit is a powerful drug. "Hey," she said. "You okay? David just called me. He sounded, Margaret, what's going on?" "Susan lives in Fort Wayne. We talk every Sunday. She knows the rhythm of my life like she knows her own. She could hear it in my silence, the wrongness." "He has a daughter," I said. The words felt like stones in my throat. "A grown daughter from before." "Before what?" "Before us, during us, I don't know." The silence on her end was deep. Then, "Oh, honey, where are you?" "Home." "I'm coming down." "No," the word came out sharp. "I need to, Susan, there's paperwork, a trust. I think he's been hiding money, I think." I stopped, because I'd just seen the date on the trust document. 2005. 6 years after we were married. 6 years into the life I thought was mine. The trust was worth $2 million, funded from the Davies estate. That's when I understood. This wasn't just a secret child. This was embezzlement. This was fraud. This was my husband stealing from a dead man's family to build a life I knew nothing about, and my signature was on the notary page. I'd notarized it. He'd brought it home, said it was for a client who couldn't make it to the office. I'd stamped it without reading. Why would I read? He was my husband. The man who rubbed my feet after double shifts at the hospital before I retired. The man who cried when our son graduated basic training. The man who'd been planning to buy a boat for our retirement. Our asterisk retirement. The front door opened. David. He had a key. Of course he had a key. It was his house. But for a second, I felt the intrusion like a physical blow. "Margaret," he said. He looked smaller. Or maybe I was seeing him clearly for the first time. "Let me explain." "Is she yours?" I asked. I pointed at the birth certificate like it was a weapon. He closed his eyes, nodded once. "And the money?" "It's complicated. It looks very simple from here, David." He sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd eaten Thanksgiving dinner 2 weeks ago. Our son Thomas had been home on leave. David had carved the turkey the same way his father taught him, shoulder to shoulder with our boy, a picture of generational continuity. Now David sat there looking at his hands like they belonged to someone else. "Sarah was sick," he said. "Dying. She was terrified about what would happen to Elaine. Her husband left them nothing. The estate was a mess. I helped." "You stole." "I reallocated, temporarily. The trust was supposed to be repaid from my own accounts. It's just timing got away from me." "Timing?" The word tasted like ash. 20 years of timing. "Elaine doesn't know," he said. "She thinks the money came from her father's life insurance, a policy I found in the paperwork. She thinks I'm just the executor, a family friend." "A family friend," I laughed. It came out wrong, like a sob. "You're going to fix this," I said. Not a question, an order. The way you talk to a child who's broken something valuable. "I'm trying, but there's an audit coming. The new firm manager, Robert, he's been asking questions. I need time." "How much time?" "A month, maybe 2. I looked at him, really looked. The man I'd slept next to for 9,000 nights. The man whose snoring I'd learned to tune out, whose coffee I made exactly the way he liked it, whose shirts I'd ironed without thinking for a quarter century. And I saw a stranger who was asking me to be an accomplice. "You want me to lie," I said. "I want you to trust me." Those words, trust me asterisk, they hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. My phone buzzed again. Not Susan, not David. A number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something, maybe that same instinct that made me take the photograph, made me answer. "Mrs. Hargrave," a man's voice, formal. "This is Detective Miller with the Millbrook PD. We need you to come down to the station. It's about your husband's firm." David's head snapped up. I saw the color drain from his face. Not guilt. Fear. Real animal fear. "What about it?" I asked the detective. "There are some inconsistencies in the accounting. A client's family has raised concerns. We'd like to get your statement." "My statement about what?" "About the trust documents you notarized, and about your knowledge of the Davies estate." I hung up. The phone felt hot in my hand. "They're going to arrest you," I said to David. Not a question. I could see it in his posture, the way he was already calculating. Maybe, but they'll come after you too. Your signature, Margaret, your notary seal, you're the trustee on paper. I didn't know. Can you prove that? The room tilted. I grabbed the counter. That's when I realized this wasn't just a secret. This was a plan, or part of one. 20 years of weaving me into a story I didn't know I was part of. Every time I'd notarized something without reading. Every time I'd signed where he pointed. Every time I'd trusted that my husband, the attorney, knew what was best. I was the alibi. I was the shield. Get out, I said, very quiet. Margaret. Get out of my house. He left. He took his keys. He took his phone. He left the pill bottle on the counter. I threw it in the trash. Then I took it out. Then I threw it away again. Then I sat on the floor and stared at the cabinet where we kept the good china. The china his mother gave us. The china I'd been saving for Elaine's wedding. Not my son's wife. Her asterisk. The daughter I didn't know I had a claim on. The detective called again. I let it go to voicemail. Susan called. I texted her. Not now. I'll call you tonight. But I knew I wouldn't. How do you tell your sister that your marriage was a legal fiction? That your life was the price of someone else's security? I slept in the guest room that night. Or I tried to. At 3 a.m., I got up and drove. Not to Susan. Not to Thomas's place in Indianapolis. I drove to the one person who might understand what it meant to be erased by David Hargrave. I drove to Sarah Davies' house. It was a small place on the north side of town. A ranch house with yellow siding. The porch light was on. I sat in my car across the street for an hour, maybe more, watching the windows, watching for Elaine, for some ghost of the life that had been built with my husband's money, his time, his secret loyalty. A car pulled into the driveway. Not Elaine. A man. He went inside. The lights came on. A dog barked. Just a normal life. A life built on a foundation I'd helped pour, concrete mixed with lies. At 6 a.m., I drove home. David's car wasn't in the driveway. Good. I packed a bag, not much, clothes for 3 days, the photograph of Elaine, the trust documents I'd photographed with my phone, my own birth certificate, my marriage license, proof that I existed before him, proof that I could exist after. I was at the courthouse when it opened, not the police station. The courthouse. I needed to see the original files. If I was going down for this, I needed to know the depth of the water. The clerk was a woman I'd known for years. Marjorie. We served on the Presbyterian Women's Committee together. She smiled when she saw me. Margaret, what brings you here so early? I need to see the Davies probate file, I said. From 2012. Her smile faltered. That's a closed file. I'd need authorization from the attorney of record. That would be my husband. Oh, well then. He's under investigation for fraud, Marjorie, and I need to see what he did before they lock the files down. The words came out flat, factual, no tears, no hysterics, just the truth, which was weapon enough. Marjorie's face did a complicated dance. Then she stood. Come with me. We went into the back room. The air was colder there. She pulled a box from a shelf, blew dust off the top. This hasn't been digitized yet. Old cases, we're behind. I sat at a small table. She left me alone. The first document was the will. Standard, straightforward. Sarah Davies inherited everything from her husband. House, investments, a life insurance policy worth $500,000. I flipped pages. The inventory of assets. The notice to creditors. Then the accounting, David's accounting. It showed the life insurance policy. It showed the disbursement. $500,000 to Sarah Davies personally, not to a trust, not to Elaine, to Sarah. But I'd seen the trust document. It showed $2 million, funded from the estate. Where had that extra $1.5 million come from? I kept digging. There, a deed. Sarah had sold the house 6 months after her husband died for $200,000 below market value. The buyer was a shell corporation. I recognized the name, Hargrave Holdings. My husband had bought his mistress's house through a company I didn't know existed, with money I couldn't trace. The room started to close in. I put my head between my knees like they teach you in nursing school for shock. Breathe. Count. But counting doesn't help when the numbers are all lies. My phone buzzed. Detective Miller again. This time I answered. Mrs. Hargrave, we have a warrant for your husband's arrest. We need you to come in. Now. I'm at the courthouse. Stay there, I'll meet you. He hung up. I sat in that cold room with the ghost of Sarah Davies and the paperwork of my own ruin. Marjorie peeked in. Margaret, are you? I'm fine, I lied. Just need a minute. She closed the door. I heard the lock click. Not to keep me in, I realized. To keep others out. To give me privacy while my world finished collapsing. Detective Miller was younger than I expected. Clean-shaven. Polite. He sat across from me in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and anxiety. Mrs. Hargrave, he said, we've been looking at your husband's firm for 6 months. Anonymous tip. Someone inside. Robert, the partner, of course. The Davies estate is just the beginning, he said. There are others. 7 others, all widows, all with children, all with trusts that you notarized. He slid a folder across the table. Photocopies of my signature, my seal, my complicity stamped in purple ink. I didn't know, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. Your husband says otherwise. He says you were aware, that you helped him set up the system, that the money was for your retirement. The laugh that came out of me was ugly. My retirement? Detective, I have $3,400 in my personal savings account. My name isn't on the mortgage. I don't even have my own credit card. David handled everything. Convenient story, he said. Not unkind, just factual. It's the truth. The truth is going to be hard to prove. The paper trail says you're a co-conspirator. He let that word hang. Co-conspirator, not a wife, not a victim, a partner in crime. I looked at my hands. The skin was thin, bruised easily these days. I'd always thought they were honest hands, nurses' hands. Now I saw them as evidence. What do you want from me? I asked. Cooperation. Wear a wire. Get him to admit you weren't involved. He's smarter than that. Maybe, but you're his wife. He'll want to protect you, or he'll want to implicate you. Either way, we need the conversation. I thought about the man who'd made me coffee every morning for 25 years. Who? Held my hand when my mother had her stroke. Who? Whispered I'm lost without you when I had my hysterectomy. Was that man still in there? Or was he a fiction created by a better lawyer than I'd realized? Okay, I said. They fitted me with the wire at the station. A small device that stuck to my skin like a Band-Aid. The technician was a woman about Elaine's age. She didn't meet my eyes. Just get him talking, Detective Miller said. Get him to say you didn't know, or get him to explain the system. Either way, we need his voice on tape. I drove home. The house was still empty. David's car was still gone. I sat in the silence and waited. For the first time in my life, I had no idea what came next. No plan, no script. Just the weight of the wire against my ribs and the certainty that whatever happened, I would never be the same woman who'd walked into that office yesterday. He came at dusk. I heard the garage door open, the kitchen door closed. He stood in the doorway, his suit rumpled, his eyes red. Where have you been? I asked, calm, like we were discussing grocery lists. With Robert, trying to fix this. Can it be fixed? He sat down heavily in his chair. The one with the good lumbar support. The one I'd bought him for Christmas last year. Maybe, if you're willing to help. How? He leaned forward. We say you were confused, that you notarized things but didn't understand, that I pressured you, that you were a victim. The truth, then. His eyes narrowed. The truth is whatever keeps us both out of prison. The truth is we need a story that sticks. Us both. There it was, the rope he was throwing me, tied to an anchor. Tell me about Elaine, I said. He flinched. What do you want to know? Everything, starting with when you found out about her. He rubbed his face. The gesture was so familiar it hurt. Sarah told me she was pregnant after her husband died. She was alone, scared. I helped her, that's all. You helped her with $1.5 million of client money. I helped her with a future, for her daughter, for my daughter. The word asterisk my landed like a slap. My daughter was Thomas. My daughter was the baby we'd tried for after him, the ones I'd lost. My daughter was the ghost of all the children I never had. Elaine was his, not mine, never mine. Did you love her? I asked. Sarah. He looked at his hands. I loved the idea of saving someone. Same way I loved the idea of you, the nurse, the stable one, the partner who'd never asked questions. The wire was recording all of this. Every word a nail in his coffin, or mine. I couldn't tell anymore. What happens now? I asked. Now we wait for the indictment. Then we decide how to plead. And Elaine. She knows nothing. She thinks the trust is legitimate. She thinks I'm a good man. The laugh came out before I could stop it. She's going to find out. Maybe, but not from you. Not if you want to stay out of prison. Threat or warning. I couldn't parse it. My husband had become a language I no longer spoke. That night I slept in the guest room again. At 2 a.m. I heard his phone ring. He answered in a whisper. I crept to the door, pressed my ear against it. Elaine, calm down, he said. No, you don't need to come here. I'll handle it. Just stay at school. Focus on your exams. A pause, then. I know I'm sorry. I love you too. I love you too. He said those words to me that morning, before I'd found the file, before I'd taken the photograph, before I'd become a woman who wore wires to talk to her own husband. I went back to bed. In the morning, he was gone. A note on the counter, meeting with lawyer. Don't talk to police without one, as if I was the one who needed reminding. Detective Miller called. We got enough. We're picking him up today. Stay away from the house. I went to Susan's. She opened the door, took one look at me, and pulled me into a hug that smelled like lavender and safety. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. But in her kitchen, with her ancient labradoodle sniffing my knees, I broke. The kind of crying that comes from a place so deep you didn't know you had it in you. The kind that feels like it's rewriting your bones. He has a daughter, I gasped out between sobs, and I'm going to prison for her. Susan held me tighter. No, you're not. But she didn't know. She hadn't seen the papers. She hadn't heard the detective say co-conspirator asterisk. She hadn't felt the weight of that wire and understood that truth is just another piece of evidence, and evidence can be twisted. David was arrested at his office. They let me watch from the observation room. I saw him walk out in handcuffs, Robert standing in the background, face stone. The partner who'd tipped them off. The partner who'd been my husband's friend for 30 years. The partner who'd come to our wedding and danced with my mother, and now was the reason David's head was ducked into the back of a police car. They held him for 3 days. I didn't visit. I hired my own lawyer, a woman, Patricia Chen. She looked at the evidence and said, this is bad, but it's not hopeless. He clearly coerced you. We can argue duress, lack of intent. How much will that cost? I asked. Everything you have, maybe more. I signed the retainer anyway. What choice did I have? The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks out. I had to appear. I had to sit in that courtroom, the same courthouse where David had argued 100 cases, where the judge knew him by first name, where I'd watched him win justice for clients who'd been wronged. Now I'd sit there and watch them decide if I was the wrongdoer. Patricia prepared me. They'll ask about every document, every signature, every conversation. You need to be consistent. You need to be believable. I am believable, I said, because I'm telling the truth. The truth is messy. The jury wants clean. Jury, the word landed heavy. This was going to trial. This wasn't going away. I went back to the house to get clothes for court. David was there, out on bail. He was packing a suitcase. Where are you going? I asked. Away, until this is over. You can't leave town. That's a condition. I'm not leaving town. I'm staying at the Marriott by the highway. I can't be here, with you, with this. This me, the life we'd built. David, I said, tell them I didn't know, please. He looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd married. The one who'd promised to love and cherish. The one who'd held my hand in the delivery room when Thomas was born, even though the nurses said fathers stayed by the head. He wanted to see everything, to be part of it all. I can't, he said. If I admit I lied to you, I admit I lied to everyone. The bar, the clients, the court, I lose everything. You've already lost everything. Not yet, he said, and I understood. He was still playing the odds, still seeing a path where he came out clean, where Elaine kept her trust, where I took the fall. He left. I stood in the empty house and listened to the refrigerator hum, the sound of a life that had forgotten how to be alive. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize, a woman's voice, young, scared. Mrs. Hargrave, this is Elaine Davies. I think we need to talk. We met at a diner on the south side of town, not the one where everyone knew me, a chain place with laminated menus and waitresses who didn't care. She was already in a booth when I arrived. She looked like her photograph. Dark hair, David's eyes, my cheekbones, which was impossible, but there it was. The ghost of a family resemblance that wasn't mine to claim. She stood when she saw me, hesitated, then extended her hand. Thank you for coming. Her handshake was firm. I taught David to shake hands like that, to look people in the eye, to mean it. She ordered coffee. I ordered tea. We sat in silence while the waitress poured. Then Elaine leaned forward. My mother left me a letter, she said, to be opened if anything ever happened to David. She died 3 years ago. I didn't open it until last week, when I heard about the arrest. She slid an envelope across the table. My name was on it, in Sarah's handwriting, for Margaret Hargrave to be delivered if necessary ***. My hands shook as I opened it. The paper was thin. The ink was faded. Margaret, if you're reading this, it means David's lies have finally caught him. And I'm sorry. I never meant for you to be part of this. But I was dying and I was scared, and David offered me a way to protect Elaine. He said you knew. He said you understood. He said you were a good woman who wanted to help. I see now that was just another lie he told to get what he wanted. The trust is real. The money is real. But your part in it was never supposed to happen. He forged your signature on some of the later documents. I have proof. It's in a safe deposit box at the Millbrook First Bank, box 417. The key is in my jewelry box in the lining. Use it. Tell them everything. And please don't blame Elaine. She never knew. She thinks the world of David, just like I did once. I looked up at Elaine. Her eyes were wet. I didn't know, she said. About the fraud, about you. I thought he was my godfather, my mother's friend. She said he was the only man she could trust. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Did you know he's your father? I asked. She nodded. She told me when I turned 18, said he couldn't be in my life publicly because of his wife, because of his son, because of his reputation. I accepted it. I thought he was doing his best. His best. That phrase again. The one he'd used on me for 25 years. Elaine reached into her bag. I have the key from my mother's jewelry box. I want you to have it. I don't want the money if it's stolen. I don't want any of it. She placed a small brass key on the table between us. It looked like it could open a dollhouse, not a prison, not a life. Why are you helping me? I asked. Because my mother loved him, she said, and she was wrong, and I don't want to be wrong the same way. We sat there while our coffee went cold. 2 women who'd shared a man without sharing a life, who'd both believed in a version of David Hargrave that had never really existed. I have to testify, I said, against him. I know, she said. I'll be there. I'll tell them what I know. You'll ruin him. He ruined himself. She was 23 years old, and she understood something it had taken me 58 years to see. That love without truth is just another kind of theft. The trial started on a Tuesday. The same day of the week, I'd walked into David's office with his heart medication. The courtroom was packed. Small towns love a scandal. They filled the pews, church members, colleagues, clients who'd trusted David with their parents' estates. They watched me walk in on Patricia's arm like I was the one in handcuffs. David sat at the defense table in a suit I'd picked out for him. He didn't look at me, not once. The prosecution called Robert first. He testified about the anonymous tip, about the audit he'd initiated, about finding discrepancies in 7 estates, about the pattern, always widows, always children, always trusts, always my signature. Then they called the bank manager. He identified the safe deposit box, the key, the documents inside, Sarah's letter, forgeries of my signature expert verified, the real ones, the fake ones, a paper trail of my husband's deceit mapped out like a constellation. The prosecutor was a woman named Angela Marks. She wore a sharp blazer and sharper eyes. She looked at me like I was a puzzle she hadn't solved yet. "Mrs. Hargrave," she said when it was my turn, "did you know about the Davies Trust?" "No." "Did you know about Elaine Davies?" "No." "Did you know your husband was stealing from his clients?" "No." "Then why did you notarize the documents?" "Because my husband asked me to, because I trusted him, because I believed that love meant saying yes without asking why." Patricia shifted next to me. That wasn't the script, but it was the truth. "And now," Angela Marks asked. "Now I believe that love without truth is just another word for prison." The courtroom was silent. I could hear the clock ticking, the same clock that had timed David's arguments, his victories, his lies. David's lawyer cross-examined me. He was older, slick. He asked about my nursing career, about my intelligence, about whether a woman who'd passed the state boards could really claim she didn't understand legal documents. "I understood the words," I said. "I didn't understand the man who wrote them." He asked about our finances, about the house, the car, the retirement accounts, about whether I'd benefited from the fraud. "I benefited from a salary my husband earned," I said. "I didn't benefit from theft." "But you lived in the house, drove the car, took the vacations." "Yes, and I believed they were paid for with honest work. Was I supposed to audit my own husband?" He had no answer for that, or maybe he did, but it wouldn't have mattered. The jury was looking at me differently now, not as a co-conspirator, as a wife, as a woman who'd been played. Then Elaine took the stand. She was calm, clear. She told them about the letter, about the key, about her mother's confession, about believing David was a good man, about learning he was. "Did you know the money was stolen?" Angela Marks asked. "No, I thought it was from my father's life insurance. That's what my mother told me. That's what David told me." "And now that you know?" "I've transferred the entire trust to an escrow account. I don't want it. I never wanted anything but a father, and I got a thief." David finally looked up, his face crumpled. Not for me, for her, for the daughter he'd built this house of cards to protect, the one who was now testifying against him. The trial lasted 8 days. I sat there every day, listening to accountants explain how he'd moved money, listening to clients talk about how they'd trusted him with their dead husband's legacies, listening to the life I'd lived be dissected like a cadaver, every organ labeled and weighed. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. I sat in the hall with Patricia, drinking bad coffee from a styrofoam cup. Elaine sat across from us, reading a textbook. Finals week. She was going to be a lawyer. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. When the bailiff called us back, my legs didn't want to work. Patricia had to steady me. We filed in. David stood. I stood. The judge asked for the verdict. "Guilty," the foreman said on all counts. David didn't react, not outwardly, but I saw his shoulders slump like someone had let the air out of him. The man I'd married was finally fully gone. The sentencing was set for a month out. David was released on bond, confined to house arrest. He came home with an ankle monitor. The house that was now in foreclosure because the firm's assets were seized. The house we'd have to sell to pay restitution. The house that had never really been mine. We lived in it together for 3 weeks. Me in the guest room, him in the master. We didn't speak. We were 2 ghosts haunting the same address. One night I heard him crying. Properly crying the way men do when they think no one can hear. I stood outside his door and listened. Part of me wanted to go in, to hold his hand, to tell him it would be okay. That's what I'd done for 25 years. I'd made things okay for him. But I didn't. I went back to my room and packed another bag. The house was being sold at auction next week. I'd found a studio apartment over on Elm Street. Small, cheap, mine. The day before the sentencing, Elaine came by. She knocked on the door like a stranger. We sat in the kitchen where David and I had once planned our future. "The escrow account," she said. "It's being returned to the estates, all of it with interest. It won't cover everything, but it's something." "Thank you," I said. "You didn't have to do that." "I did," she said. "It was never mine." She handed me an envelope. "My mother wrote another letter. For you. She said to give it to you after the trial, when it was over." It was sealed. I didn't open it in front of her. We sat in silence for a while, then she left. I watched her drive away in a sensible Honda. The kind David would have approved of. The kind bought with clean money. I opened the letter after she was gone. "Margaret, by now you know everything. And I hope you know I never wanted to hurt you. I was dying and I was selfish and I let David convince me that the ends justified the means. But they don't. They never do. What I need you to know is this. Elaine is not David's biological daughter. He believed she was. I let him believe it. But her father was my husband. The man who left us nothing. David was just the man who couldn't let a child go unprotected. It was his weakness. His need to be needed. He built the trust because he thought he owed her a father. He stole because he thought he was saving her. He lied to you because he couldn't face his own failure. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm asking you to understand that the man you loved was real. He just wasn't strong enough to be that man for both of us. The key to box 417. There's one more thing in there. A life insurance policy David took out on himself in 2008. The beneficiary is you. $500,000. Clean money. He wanted you to be taken care of, even after he was gone, even after you knew, maybe especially then. I read it 3 times. The words blurred, not from tears, from rage. From the sheer audacity of Sarah Davies, dead 3 years, reaching from the grave to absolve a man who destroyed me. I called Patricia. Can a life insurance policy be seized for restitution? Depends on when it was purchased, and with what funds. Clean funds, 2008, before the fraud. Then it's probably protected. Why? I told her about the letter, about the policy, about the final twist of the knife. "That's his escape hatch," she said. "His way of making you the beneficiary of his crime. You take that money, you look complicit." "But it's legal." "Legal and right aren't the same thing." I knew that now, better than anyone. The next morning, I went to the bank. I opened box 417. There it was. The policy. $500,000. Enough to start over. Enough to be comfortable. Enough to be the woman who survived her husband's betrayal and came out with a nest egg. I held it in my hands. I thought about the house I was losing. The retirement I'd never have. The son who was ashamed to answer my calls. The sister who was draining her own savings to pay my lawyer. I thought about Elaine, working double shifts at the library to make up for the trust she'd given back. I thought about David, sitting in our house with his ankle monitor, waiting for his sentence, probably still believing he'd done the right thing, just the wrong way. And I made a choice. At the sentencing, I sat in the front row. David sat at the defense table, hands folded. The judge asked if anyone wanted to speak before she passed sentence. I stood. Patricia grabbed my arm. "Margaret, don't." I shook her off, walked to the podium. "Your Honor," I said, "my husband stole from 7 families. He built a life for a daughter who wasn't his, with money that wasn't his, while I notarized documents I didn't understand. I have been a victim. I have been a fool. But I have also been complicit in my own blindness. I chose not to see what was in front of me because seeing it would have meant losing the life I thought I had. That is my crime, and I'm serving a life sentence for it. But David, he doesn't need more prison. He needs to face what he did, all of it." I looked at David. He was crying, openly now. "There's a life insurance policy," I said. $500,000, it's legal, it's clean. And I'm signing it over to the victim's fund, every penny, because I don't want his salvation, I want their restitution. The courtroom erupted. The judge banged her gavel. David's lawyer objected. But I just stood there, holding the policy I'd pulled from my purse like a white flag. David was sentenced to 15 years. The judge cited my statement. She said it showed the depth of his betrayal. That he'd betrayed not just the law, but the trust of a woman who'd loved him enough to tell the truth even when it cost her everything. I walked out of the courthouse into the October air. Elaine was on the steps. She didn't say anything, just handed me a tissue. We stood there while the sun went down, two women who'd been casualties of the same man's good intentions. "You'll be okay," she said. It wasn't a question. "I have a studio apartment," I said, "and a job interview at the hospital. They're taking me back per diem." "That's good. What about you?" "Law school. I want to prosecute white-collar crime. Seems relevant." We almost smiled. Almost. I drove home to the house that was no longer mine. The auction sign was already in the yard. I packed the last of my things. The photograph of Elaine, the letter from Sarah, the copy of the life insurance policy, now stamped with the court's order to liquidate. At midnight, I sat in the empty kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd made coffee that Tuesday morning, where I'd found the pill bottle, where I'd thrown it away and retrieved it and thrown it away again. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Hargrave, this is the manager at Millbrook First Bank. I thought you should know. The safe deposit box you accessed, there was another item in there, a small envelope. It must have fallen behind when you removed the policy. We found it today during inventory. It's addressed to you. You can pick it up anytime." I stared at the message. Another letter, another secret, another truth waiting to be unwrapped. I thought about leaving it, about walking away from the bank and the box and all of David's final confessions. I had my studio apartment waiting. I had my job interview. I had my son, who'd finally called and said, "Mom, I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first." I had enough. But I didn't have answers. I drove to the bank at 7. The manager was waiting. He handed me a small envelope, plain white, my name in David's handwriting. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key, not a bank key, a house key. "Margaret, if you're reading this, it means you found Sarah's letter. It means you know about Elaine. It means you probably hate me, and you should. But there's one more thing you need to know. The house on Elm Street, the one you're renting, I bought it 6 months ago through a clean trust with legitimate funds. It's in your name only. The deed is recorded. The key is yours. I knew this was coming. I knew I was coming undone. I wanted you to have something that was only yours. No strings, no lies. Just a place to start over. Don't try to give it back. You can't. It's already yours. And so is the truth, which is that I loved you. I loved you the only way I knew how, which was poorly and with too many secrets. But it was real, at least that part. D." I sat there while the sun came up. While the bank opened and customers walked past my car with their normal lives and their normal problems. While the key sat in my palm, warm from my own skin. The house on Elm Street was mine, bought with clean money, bought while he was still lying to me, bought as a lifeboat for a ship he was sinking. I could keep it, I could sell it, I could burn the key and walk away. But I didn't. I drove to Elm Street. The house was small, yellow, with a porch swing. The number was 417, the same as the safe deposit box. He'd planned that too. Little jokes for a man who knew he was going away. I sat on the porch swing and watched the neighborhood wake up. A woman walked her dog. A kid rode his bike. Normal life humming along. My phone buzzed. A text from Detective Miller. "He wants to see you, before they transfer him, says it's important." I didn't answer. Not yet. Because I was sitting on a porch swing on a house that was mine, bought by a man who'd stolen millions, but somehow managed to give me one true thing. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know if it was redemption or one final manipulation. I didn't know if I was free or just imprisoned in a smaller, prettier cage. I still don't. That's what I need you to understand. Some stories don't end. They just pause. And the next chapter depends on what you do when you realize the key in your hand opens a door you never asked for, to a house you're not sure you want, given by a man you're not sure you ever knew. What would you do? Would you go inside? Would you sell it? Would you testify against him one more time just to be sure? I haven't decided yet. I'm still sitting on this swing, holding a key, waiting for the answer that doesn't come. Because sometimes the shocking secret isn't what you uncover about someone else. It's what you discover about what you're willing to live with. And I'm still figuring that out. I don't have an answer. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But I'm going inside now. The light is warm. Robert is holding the door. And for now, that has to be enough. Or maybe the real reckoning is just beginning. I haven't decided yet.